Are you hiring? Do you know where to post your job to find the best candidates? With ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to 100 plus job sites with just one click. Then their powerful technology efficiently matches the right people to your job better than anyone else. That's why ZipRecruiter is different. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you, it finds them. In fact, 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within 1 day. No juggling emails or calling to your office. Simply screen, rate, and manage candidates all in one place with ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. And right now, my listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/M&M. That's ZipRecruiter.com/M&M. One more time, to try it for free, go to ZipRecruiter.com/M&M.
It's time for some straight talk. Some people are big-time data users, some not so much.
Well, Straight Talk Wireless has unlimited plans of all sizes, like the newest, with the first 2 gigs of data at high speed, then 2G for just $35 a month. That's unlimited talk, text, and data, all on America's largest and most dependable networks. Big or small, everyone saves with Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts, only at Walmart.
A month equals 30 days. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
Here we are. We're Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, like Ryan Smith, our terrific legal analyst. And there's a bunch of legal questions we have this morning involving Jerry Jones and the Dolphins and some of the kneeling policies they want to put in place. How are those legally enforceable, if they are indeed? I'm curious to know. We'll ask him those questions. Chris Furster, the resignation of the Dolphins offensive line coach in the wake of the incredibly embarrassing video that was released and all of that. Plus, we'll get a quick check-in on the Zeke Elliott situation with him as well. Then Trey Wingo and Darren Woodson will be in here talking a bunch of football as well. So we got a bunch of things in the hopper on this incredibly busy time. But if you wanted to sort of put a ribbon on the conversation we just had, again, about the mentality of the football player, because both Adam Schefter and Max Kellerman yesterday were suggesting that it was a mistake for Odell to be on the field in the precarious financial position that he's in. And I totally understand what they're saying. I also understand the mentality of the football player is to never even consider that. You're a football player, you play. I wonder how much that's going to change. That's sort of my perspective on it. What's your final thought?
There's a reason you make it to that level. You have to have a certain mentality to where I can certainly – it's not that you have to have that complete old school mentality like, my dad gave to me, if you can walk, you can play. Listen, we've come a long way from there. We've come a long way from, water was only for the weak. We've learned an awful lot about the game. So to sit there and say we couldn't evolve even more to understand this part of it would be wrong. But I think there are limits. And I think a player who's healthy, knowingly that they're just going to sit out for an entire season until they get paid, I'm not saying it's never going to happen. Listen, it happened in '85 with Al Harris and Todd Bell. I don't believe it's happened since, but guys have held out since then. So I don't know. I mean, I know Adam's been saying this about Odell. Did he say it? I would imagine he said it about Aaron Donald as well.
He said it on our show about
Zach
Aaron
Martin.
Donald.
I mean, those are the three. These guys are going to be the highest paid at their position. And sit. I just can't fathom the mentality. I mean, you could see holding out for a bit, but then, guys just don't hold out for a long time. Then it's like the team basically knows he's not going to hold out that long. He's eventually going to come back. So it may be an eye-opener to a team if a guy goes past that 8th week where he now loses that year of service, but he's willing to do that because he feels, I don't want to be in the position of getting injured before I get paid. And then at what point would it really shift to the team? Because quite honestly, I mean, if the Giants are 0-5, say Odell was sitting and they're 0-5, are the Giants going to think we get Odell back, we're back in this thing? No. So they may just say, let him sit. It's fine. We're not paying him. At this point, it's not like our hopes for the playoff are dashed because he's not here. At what point you always look for who has the leverage, who has the hammer. And these guys are in a position where they could have the hammer. But when does it shift to when does the player have it? When does the team have it? That's
the
what you
player
always
doesn't
look for.
have it at all, for exactly the reason you just gave. Because the team knows that ultimately the player either has to come in and play for them at the salary that is prescribed, or for all intents and purposes retire. Well, Odell Beckham would basically have to have been willing to say, "I'll never come back."
Well, how about Aaron Donald? This team, what if he still hasn't shown up, and this team is playing as well? Then you start to say, man, okay, you know what you don't say? Well, we're playing this good without him. We don't need him. You're not saying that. You're saying, you know what? We're doing really well. We may have a shot to compete here. We need to get this guy in. That's where it can shift.
$50 million?
Well, that's where that's where you may do it. Now, again, I'm not the capologist of what it does to your team and where you can fit that in. That's why you saw a deal, and maybe they can't. I mean, maybe you're at the cap where you say, dude, we can't do this right now, where you do the Antonio Brown thing, and you kind of appease them, throw some crumbs their way, a few million to say, we'll take care of it, come back in and play. We'll give you a little bit of money here, and then we'll really, get it over the top. Because I don't know where the cap situations are as well if they're going to hold out of what they would have to do. But that's what it comes down to. And you're right. The player rarely has that swingable leverage hammer for a long time.
A lot of people are also pointing out, and it is accurate, Anita Mark sent me a text about it, and many are saying it in my Twitter as well, that Odell is the highest paid what was the word I'm looking for? His endorsement deal with Nike is the highest of any football player.
Right? 25 mil.
There have to be some provisions about that he has to be on the field. If he's holding out, if he's not playing, I don't know how that would impact his endorsement deal with Nike.
You can't do that. I mean, you're a player, and I'm not signing a deal that says I get hurt.
No, not hurt. But I mean, if he were to hold out the season,
hold out, right.
You know what I mean?
Yes,
he's playing for the 1.8, but he's also playing for the 25.
That
million.
I don't know. That I don't know about.
I don't either.
It's
probably whether it's written into the contract or not.
Right.
But clearly, that's a part of it. His being on the field is what makes him valuable to them. I'm not talking about the injury piece.
Right.
I'm talking about going on the field in the first place. So, look, there's a lot of different things that go into this. All I'll say is I'm not asking anyone to feel sorry for football players. You have a great job, a great life. People would trade places with you in the blink of an eye, and there's a lot of money in it. For everybody, the minimum salary is so much more than most people ever make. But if you look at the way the thing is structured and you look at the amount of work, time, energy, and effort that goes into getting there, I'll tell you something. It's not all it's cracked up to be. It's not. There are a lot of things about that situation that are really rough on these players. And then I look at these guys that are retiring at these young ages. It's another example of the mentality changing, right? That are there, that have a chance to play and are saying, I don't necessarily want to because I don't know that the risks are worth it. There's a lot in the mentality about that sport, I think, that is slowly but surely shifting.
So I wonder because, again, I think this is a rare year of where you have three guys, in Aaron Donald, Zach Martin, and Odell, that will be the highest paid at their position. So then, so if you think there's going to be a shift in this, where is the shift going to come? Because these guys are already playing, so it's not going to be them. Is it going to be, where is, now Khalil Mack is I'm trying to think of the next guy who's considered, Khalil Mack is in his fourth year. So is he in that position? I'm trying to think. He's in his fourth year right now. Who's that next guy that will be one of the maybe in position to be the highest paid at their position? Because that's what we're talking about here, right? We're not talking about a Midland player who's, had their fifth-year option picked up. Well, normally you're going to be better than that. They pick up that option, but then you're going to hold out for a deal. I mean, these are rare circumstances when you're the best at your position, or in position, I should say, to be the highest paid at your position.
Yeah, or just a super high value contract. Look, we're at this point, we don't know what's going to wind up happening, but I just think that there's an interesting perspective to be had there, because in what other circumstance would you say, yes, I will willingly risk $50 million, which you are doing. But you are putting yourself in danger. By stepping onto the football field, I don't think this is overstating it, you are clearly putting yourself in jeopardy. It is a sport where your chance of getting injured is 100% in every single game. It's just a question of how badly. You're going to get hit multiple times. Now, you don't usually get hurt the way he did, and it's a terrible shame that he did. But it does happen, and you are well aware that it can happen. So it's something that I will watch with interest, and I think there'll be a lot of people out there watching to see how this thing winds up going with him and his contract.
Yeah, I agree, because as I'm looking at it, Khalil Mack is in the exact same situation. Khalil Mack, what am I saying? He was in that draft. We were talking about that first round. And he's another one who's going to get a high payday and never thought, at least I'm not in his head, but he didn't show. He wasn't sitting out. He didn't miss time anywhere either. So while I get what you're saying, I don't know if we're going to get all the way to that mentality of somebody sitting out an entire season that's in that position.
All right, much more on the baseball playoffs as we continue, and we have our esteemed legal analyst, Ryan Smith, coming up. But I wanted to throw a thought at you because the New York Giants lost 3 receivers for the season last week. 3 guys who are out for the season. Brandon Marshall tweeted yesterday his season is over. He's having season-ending surgery as well. And you put the Bears in this category as well.
Yeah.
When we were talking about this off the air. Do you think either of those teams would even consider signing Terrell Owens?
No.
T.O. continues to say he still believes he can play. To me, I find that interesting for 2 different reasons. One, T.O. coming back and playing is just interesting. He's an interesting person.
What is he, 40?
How old is
42, 43?
We'll get it.
Yeah.
Second, it would start the clock over again on his Hall of Fame candidacy.
Not like that's mattering.
So T.O., who didn't, again, I will say, I think completely unfairly, did not get into the Hall of Fame in his first year of candidacy this past season. And I am of the impression will not get in again this coming year. And I base that on the fact that the people that you talk to who make these decisions, I don't get a sense they're going to put him in. So I don't know how long he's going to wait. I do believe he will eventually get in for sure. Mm-hmm. But is it possible that he will wind up restarting his 5-year Hall of Fame clock? He is 43 years old. We know he keeps himself in unbelievable condition, but there's a difference.
He could probably be the best receiver on either one of those teams.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But no, if you're one of those teams, why would you bring him in? You're not going anywhere this year, so why would you bring in the potential of what that could be?
What could it be?
Could it be? You never know where this guy is going to go mentally. I mean, you know what you can get on the field from him, but you also know what he's been off the field, and who knows? Who knows what he's trying to turn it into? I do think he could still produce on the field. I really do. He keeps himself in unbelievable shape. I haven't seen it a lot. He's in Dancing with the Stars. Did he get voted? I mean, he's doing that right now. So
I don't know. I haven't seen
I'm not
either.
sure where he is, but we know he keeps himself in great shape. But if I'm one of those teams, I'm not bringing him in. No, I wouldn't.
It'd be interesting. If you've got the young quarterback that you're trying to develop and you give him an experienced receiver, now people probably don't view T.O. as a guy who'd be a mentor, if you will. But, it's just a thought. Because he's out there. There are probably going to be a bunch of guys out there that you've never heard of who are looking for a job, right? That particularly the Giants. Right. Again, what's the last time a team lost 4 players at the same position in the same week? How bad is the injury to Sterling Shepard? Because he went down as well.
Yeah.
But Harris is out for the year. Marshall's out for the year, and of course Odell is out for the year. So that's a lot. Jerry Rice caught 30 passes as a 42-year-old. That's the oldest to catch a pass that we can find. We'll go back and again,
T.O. keeps himself in unbelievable shape, but man, I don't think if you're either one of those two teams, you're doing that.
I would guess not as well. All right, we are Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Let's change gears here because there's a lot to get to on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line with our legal analyst, Ryan Smith, who's always there with answers to the questions that we just don't have, and he does. Ryan, good morning. How are you today?
Guys, I'm doing great. How you doing?
Doing well.
We're doing well, and so for any number of reasons, and people are well aware of them, the comments made by Jerry Jones in the last 48 hours about how all of the players on the Dallas Cowboys will stand for the anthem and respect the flag, or they will not be allowed to play, has turned into a huge controversy. We've seen the suspension of one of our colleagues, and President Trump is tweeting about it again today, and all the rest of that. And the legal side of this that I'm curious about, Ryan, is what are the legalities in this? So, which is to say, we know that there isn't anything in the collective bargaining agreement that demands that the players do this, but now 2 teams seem to have made a rule. The Cowboys have made a rule. The Dolphins have made a rule. So what is the legal piece in all of that?
So I think you talk about, Mike, the idea of what can happen within the NFL and what could happen within the courts. So let's do the NFL part. Right now, the game operations manual that they have, and that's what's been talked about by Jerry Jones and others, seem to give him the ability to do something, so to sit a player down, but he's going to have a huge fight on his hands. So that ops manual, basically, I don't know if you've already gone through this, but it's the idea that they should stand is what this manual says. They should sort of have their helmet in hand, no talking, and if they don't do that, they could have problems. The problem with that rule is that it says should. It doesn't say must. And so that leaves a lot of gray area if he tries to sit somebody down. Not only that, it appears that the rule has been changed recently, and it allows for fines and suspensions, but that really relates to being on the field, not necessarily whether you are standing, kneeling, or sitting. So it's one of those things where I think Jerry Jones has some latitude to do something if he wants to, but I think he's going to have a huge fight on his hands from the NFLPA and others that are going to say, wait a second, there's no bright line rule, so let's fight about this because you don't have the right to determine what these folks do on the sidelines. Now, fire them, a little bit different because there's something in the player contract that, like a morals clause, you have to act a certain way or we can terminate you. But they'll have to fight about that as well because the NFLPA would say, does this really rise to the level of a termination offense if somebody kneels or sits during the national anthem?
So I guess, forgetting what's in the ops manual, if a team the team is owned by Jerry Jones, says, I want to make a rule on my team, I don't care about the other 31 teams, on my team, you will stand for the national anthem or you will not play in the game. Does he have the right to just do that on his own?
I think he can do it. I think he can do it because this is a private agreement and it's not a public situation. So you talk about, people will say, well, you're limiting people's First Amendment rights. It's kind of the old adage of, hey, you can say whatever you want, but you don't have a First Amendment right to a job. So you look at this kind of situation, I think he can make the rule. The reason I say, will it hold up and he'll have a fight on his hands is there's one thing to do an action. There's another thing to make sure it can stand up under scrutiny of courts, under scrutiny of the league. And right now, there's nothing that permits them to be able to have that bright line rule that lets them say, hey, you can make a rule, sit a guy down, take his money. So that's where the fight's going to be. And even if the fight goes all the way to the NFL and goes through arbitration, as you know how that works, and if the NFL sides with Jerry Jones, you better believe it's a federal court fight. And there's a lot of other arguments that could come in that players could make to say, this is not fair. They could try to say that the rule is overbroad, that it's not defined clearly, and try to get the federal courts involved. So there's a difference between can you do it? I think he can do it. But can he enforce it and keep it and hold that rule in place? That's going to be a tough one.
There's also the difference, and Ryan Smith is with us, our legal analyst, because I heard you say you could bench him and take his money. The money, obviously, is a big piece of this because Jerry Jones didn't say the player wouldn't get paid.
Right.
And players get benched all the time and still get paid. There are players who don't play in games. There are players who are inactive for games and things like that. If the money wasn't a part of it, would it change the fight that the union or the player had?
No, I think it'd be the same fight because it's still holding a guy out of a game for behavior that's not explicitly denied in the collective bargaining agreement and any of the documents. And that's the gray area as a lawyer is where you live in all of this. And you look at this and you say, you know what, it's not about the money. It's about my guy's ability to play. And if my guy can't play because an owner creates a rule that is not anywhere else in these manuals, that is maybe loosely put somewhere, then I'm going to fight on that and I'm going to have a pretty good case. So I'm not here to say he definitely will not win on the fight, but I will say that he's going to have a tremendous fight because if it's not clearly defined, what are you relying on? You're simply relying on something that says should and talks about whether you should be on the field. And even in the player contract, you're relying on morals clauses that are very, when you look, if you take this outside of the NFL and it ends up being in the courts, if that's how far something like this would go, then you're talking about asking a court to enforce a morals clause, termination, sitting somebody down, not letting them play the game on the basis of kneeling or sitting. And I think that's going to be a very tough argument to have. What weighs in his favor is that it's a private arrangement. So the players work for the club, and in a sense, Jerry Jones can make the rule. So he makes the rule, but will he win it overall? Will it last? That's a tough one to call.
How would it change legally if the NFL decided to make the rule, change that ops manual from should to have to? Then how does that change legally?
That changes a lot. So now you're in a different you're in a different position. And I think what the situation here is, again, you're talking about two parties that got together and agreed to give each other certain rights. And one of those rights is the commissioner can do certain things with the game ops manual. So then it becomes a situation that reminds me a lot of Tom Brady. Do you remember when the Deflategate first happened? I remember everybody kept saying, including me, well, he's going to get fined $25,000 because there was something in the manual that said if you alter the balls, you could be subject to a fine, including up to $25,000. The commissioner chose to interpret that differently, put it under player conduct, and suspend him, and that's where our whole controversy began. If the NFL changes that rule, and if they change it to make it more of a player conduct issue, then it's a whole new ballgame. And all of this comes under the idea that courts, when you say, oh, well, then they're just going to bring it to federal court, that's not as easy as it sounds, because courts will say, these guys got together, they came up with the agreement, the commissioner has certain powers, now the league is changing rules to say what the league can do governing this conduct. So if that's the case, then I think the players got a tougher argument. Doesn't mean they're not going to fight it till the end, but then you've got a tougher road to hoe. But if you don't have that, if you don't have something that has the league saying this conduct is prohibited for these reasons, then I think you have a lot tougher argument if you're Jerry Jones and you're saying, well, I'm just going to change a rule, even though it's not a bright line rule that governs these guys' conduct on whether they stand, sit, or kneel.
Our legal analyst, Ryan Smith, is with us. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. Is that something the commissioner could do without it being collectively bargained? Could he change that without working with the union on it?
I think that's going to be the interesting thing. I don't think he wants to.
Right.
But I think if you take it all the way in logic, you could say, well, he has the right to make certain changes to the personal conduct policy. We've seen that before. And if he makes this part of the policy, then in a sense, he might have that kind of power. So I don't think I'm not sure if he would do it, but I think that's one of the things the Players Association has been arguing with to begin with. We don't want to make these sort of willy-nilly rule changes, but if the commissioner deems it to be something like that, then he could have that power. But I think it's one of those things where it stands right now, without a bright line rule, without something that's saying, as you said earlier, Mike, that they must stand, without something like that, you're giving the Players Association and players a lot of gray area to fight, whether it's money or it's just playing, because the Players Association doesn't want a precedent set that even if you're going to sit a guy and pay him anyway, now you're starting to try to govern his conduct, which they feel should be permitted under the First Amendment. Forget about whether or not they have the power to do that kind of thing. Now, for the Players Association, it would start to be one of these things of, okay, now I'm going to make it so that you have to walk a certain way. You can't wear certain things. You can't say certain things. And that's a road they don't want to go down to. I think any rule change is going to have a huge fight if he tries to enforce it.
So just to finish this up, and Ryan, we always so appreciate your perspective. If a Dolphins player or a Cowboys player or in any other team where a rule like this is made individually by the club does kneel during the anthem and the team and the team suspends the player even with pay, you believe the union could and would fight that and it could wind up in court?
I believe they could and would fight that. I believe that if they lose the entire NFL process of arbitration, I believe that they would want to take that on in court, and I believe that their best arguments would be, you have a policy that is not clear that says exactly what players have to do. So to try to extend that and to try to say that I can do this, I think is going to be something that the NFLPA would want to fight tooth and nail as far as they could go with it.
Ryan, you're the best with this. We so appreciate you giving us this perspective. Thanks, and we'll check in again soon. Thank you very much.
Anytime, sure thing.
That's Ryan Smith with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get instant gold status at Shell. Join the Fuel Rewards program now at fuelrewards.com/gold.
I know we're up against it, but you just wonder, instead of individual teams making their rule, you just wonder if the NFL will just change that rule and make it a rule. And maybe they're wondering, we should have done it like NBA. The NBA has that rule. And, you know, we talk about social activism. There may be none out there more than the basketball players, right? And they have a rule, a hard, fast rule. You have to respect or stand for the national anthem. Right. And you don't hear players complaining about it or trying to defy it. They're finding, there are other ways to get their messages across. So you wonder if the NFL is just going to say, boy, instead of teams piecemealing this thing, we're just going to change the rule.
Interestingly, Kobe Bryant said just recently that if he were still an active player, he would kneel during the anthem. And then what would happen? That's the question, is what will happen? Jerry Jones has made his edict. The Dolphins have made this a team rule as well. The coach was talking about it yesterday. If it is violated, if it is broken, if a player does something that breaks that rule, then what happens? I will be very interested, and I would not be surprised if it happens.
And it's very clear in the NBA, player, team, conduct, and dress. It's very clear. Players, coaches, trainers are to stand and line up in a dignified posture along the sidelines or on the foul line during the playing of the national anthem. That's in their rules.
Yeah, but it doesn't say must. There's some way in which it is a little bit more. It says R2. R2. Okay, we'll continue with that as we go. Darren Woodson, Trey Wingo on their way in here as well. We got a lot to get to this morning.
Hey everyone, Mike Golick here. Support for Mike and Mike podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS consumeraccess.org number 3030.
Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT. Home. Safe home.
All right, Mike and Darren Woodson and Trey Wingo are here, obviously from NFL Live, and Trey's about a month from now we'll be here every single day with you. But
on
we're
the other side,
right in the middle of. We just showed, for those of you on TV, this great 2-point play last night with Trubisky and the Bears. Yeah. And Golick was loving it, and all of a sudden, Woody, it seemed to me like you had some sort of contradictory point about something the defense did wrong.
That will never work again. That play again. Well, I mean, once they've seen that,
sure.
Because if Harrison Barnes is reading Harrison Smith is reading his keys as safety, number 22, who's sitting in the middle of the field, is reading his keys. He's seeing the guy pull around. Mm-hmm. Well, your job is to fill. And he stood there, and if we could, I don't know if we can see the video again.
Oh, we will. Yeah.
If we can see it from the back end, Harrison Smith is just standing there and not seeing that he's supposed to field. Now, the Minnesota Vikings did a great job of actually playing this the right way.
They did.
It's just that
they were one guy short.
And that was the guy, Harrison Smith, who didn't move off his spot. He stood there and watched this play unfold.
But what makes that play so interesting is it just proves to me that everybody is watching the Kansas City Chiefs, okay? Everything that the Chiefs do in a game earlier in the year has made its way into somebody else's playbook later on this season because the Chiefs have the most interesting, dynamic, complex offense there is, and every play that the Chiefs have run in weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4 is suddenly showing up in weeks 5 with somebody else. That's a derivation of what the Chiefs did earlier this year. The Carolina Panthers had a little shovel pass from Cam Newton to Christian McCaffrey, which was an exact replica of something that the Chiefs did in the week 2 with Travis Kelce against the Eagles. Right now, Andy Reid and his offense, and I don't know whether it's fake Andy Reid with the fake menu or the actual Andy Reid with the real plays, they are getting their little wrinkles in their offense from what the undefeated Chiefs are doing right now.
It's just curious to see how this works out, how it pans out throughout the rest of the season. Right. In week 11 and 12 are these little we call them trick plays.
No, listen, I'm with you. You showed it once. Now everybody's going to be up. We have it up again. Here you go, Woody, and we'll explain what you're talking about here.
Here's
the guy you're talking about in Harrison Smith.
Okay.
That he is supposed to fill here, right? Is that what you're saying?
If he fills there.
Again, this is the guy who's going to play if the quarterback comes to the outside. And what happens is,
you gotta pull. Now you got to pull. You're seeing the guard come around and pull. So what is your job as a safety? Just reading the keys. You have to fill, knowing the guard is pulling around.
Here's the guard that he's saying is pulling. Here's the tight end, Zach Miller, that's going to get the ball handed to him. You're saying Harrison Smith needs to fill.
He needs to fill somewhere in that gap.
He doesn't.
He doesn't fill. Now Anthony Barr has to come off.
So here's what we're saying. If Anthony Barr, Green, to your point, went with the quarterback, here's the hole for Zach Miller. The block here, and Harrison Smith standing right there.
Not everyone is accounted for in that block.
Right. So I'm not going to rip Harrison to it's a domer. He's a Pro Bowler. or so.
I was about to say that was a bad road to go down right away.
Off.
But the other thing that's interesting there
the
is
interception that won the game.
Also true. The other thing that's interesting there is that maybe Harrison Smith was also copying the Chiefs, because remember the Chiefs had the mannequin challenge play on when the offensive lineman froze. So maybe that's where Harrison was going.
The thing that impressed me the most, I think that you guys would agree, is the execution.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
the handoff to a running back, handing off to a tight end, and then the tight end being the actual like the option quarterback. They did it to perfection, and you're right. It shouldn't work again.
Why are you all excited about these players? You're a defensive guy.
I know, but
you're talking about you're breaking down offensive plays.
Listen,
come on back.
Listen, you got to be versatile, man. More you can do. You know that.
By the way, that's why you're in the
Ring of Honor. Right?
That's why you're in the Ring of Honor, because you knew right away what was wrong with that play.
I'm in the ring ding of honor. Okay, that's right.
Ring dings, actually.
Darren Woodson, Trey Wingo here. Straight Talk brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Okay, to spin it back, we just had this lengthy conversation with our legal analyst, Ryan Smith, talking about the legal piece in all of this. Jerry Jones has made a rule, and he wants to make sure the whole world knows it, that all of his players are going to stand for the flag. The Miami Dolphins have made a similar rule, and we don't know what conversations other teams are having. And we asked Ryan Smith, what's the legality in that? If one of the players on the Cowboys should choose to kneel and Jerry Jones were to suspend him or whatever the case may be, what legal ramifications would there be? And to sum it up, for those of you who didn't hear it, he basically said the union would fight for the player and would have a very good chance fighting for the player. Now, you played for Jerry Jones. You know him far better than any of the rest of us, Darren. And my sense has always been the players who play for him love him and have great respect for him. What is your sense of what's going on?
Listen, I think it's a bit of grandstanding by Jerry Jones, because this team had a serious team meeting before the Arizona Cardinal game a few weeks ago, and they all agreed they're not going to stay. They're not going to sit. They're going to stand for the national anthem. They're going to show a sense of unity by taking a knee before the national anthem
with Jerry, by the way.
With Jerry, and then they're going to stand. They all have been in agreement. Not one player in that locker room thought about taking a knee for that game. So for Jerry to come out after the game and say, well,
a week later,
that this is going to happen if the player stands or whatnot, they've all been in agreement. This is a simple message to every sponsor out there, especially after what happened with Vice President Pence leaving the game. So that's when he got the question. Pence leaves the game in Indianapolis. The Cowboys game ends. They throw the question at him. And what does he say? Listen, he's sending this message to all his sponsors. We are not going to take a knee. We are going to stand for the national anthem. This is a case of Jerry Jones protecting his bottom line.
Well,
period, because they've already been in agreement. I don't understand why send this message out there when they've already been in agreement.
Really quick, there are a couple of players that right at the end of the anthem raise a
David Irving.
Are those guys? What's going to happen if they do that?
Well, listen, I think there's going to be a conversation, but those are the same two guys that were in the meetings. One of those two guys were suspended.
David Irving.
When they were having these meetings.
David Irving, it's the reincarnation of Leon Lett.
Very good player.
Good rusher on the inside.
The interesting thing here, though, really, is Jerry Jones, maybe unwittingly and unknowingly, has given the power to his players to say, really? I mean, let's just – I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't either.
But let's say Dak Prescott decides to take a knee. Let's say Des Bryant decides to take a knee. Let's say Sean Lee or DeMarcus Lawrence decides to take a knee. Is he really going to sit those players? Is he really going to – you know him better than anybody. Jerry cares about – well, two things more than anything else. The bottom line and winning.
Exactly.
Okay? And if his best players decide, really, you're going to do that?
They challenge him in that aspect.
He's put himself in a very precarious position.
And you know what? Jerry always finds a way to throw gasoline on the fire. I mean, it's something all the time. And I'm sure the players are going to have to hear this every day this week. And I think that's what's upsetting to Jason Garrett, and that's what's going to be upsetting to the entire coaching staff, because now it becomes a distraction.
Right.
Everyone in that from Dak Prescott to the special teams player, whoever it is, or to David Irving, who just played his first game, are going to have to answer this question the entire week. And I think that's what's frustrating for the fan base and the players in that locker room.
I am in agreement. I don't think any players are going to test that. What I think in the larger picture, Trey, let me start with you. Do you think, we know the NBA has a rule, and the rule is being followed by the players. And those NBA players we've talked about, they're very socially active.
Yes.
But they're not challenging that rule at all. They're finding other ways to have their voice heard. Do you think instead of piecemealing, it's the last thing I asked Ryan Smith, instead of the Dolphins doing this and the Cowboys doing this, and maybe another team maybe throws a rule in another, that the league will just say, you know what? In our ops manual where it says should, we're going to do
must.
Has to or must, whatever it is, and just change this rule once and for all. Do you think that'll happen?
I think that's something the NFL would very much like to get done this offseason, and I think they'd like to get that straightened out. So we're not going through this time and time again. But again, if they do change something in the ops manual, I think that's something that would have to be bargained.
Now,
with the NFLPA.
Really quickly, I don't mean to jump in quickly, but I don't know. Was it bargained in the NBA? Based off of why they changed this rule and made this rule.
Wasn't that for Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf?
Yes, it was. So I don't know if they sat down with the players in the union and talked about it, or if they just made the rule. See the one
thing I think the NFL absolutely they don't want to be doing this next year.
I agree.
They don't want to be going through this again next year. So and look, I know we're getting into a million different tangents here, but I think it's important for people to understand the whole reason. Remember, Colin Kaepernick sat. And that was the thing that upset him. It was a Green Beret from the state of Texas, Nate Boyer, who said kneeling actually shows a sign of respect because it's something that we do in the field. So people have all these opinions about it, and I understand all of it. But please understand, this all began when a Green Beret from the state of Texas had a conversation with Colin Kaepernick and said kneeling actually is a sign of respect. Just that needs to be – people need to remember that part of
Go all the
discussion.
way back to the beginning of where this all started.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I'm so happy, I feel like I can fly.
Disclaimer, you will not be able to fly by switching to Geico. This is against the laws of physics and nature. If you find yourself flying, please seek professional and or medical help immediately. In the unlikely event you find yourself flying, you might be a superhero, or a pigeon, or a superhero named Pidgewoman, who was bitten by a radioactive pigeon. If you are indeed Pidgewoman, Geico retains all licensing publishing rights in the event Pidgewoman the movie becomes a top-grossing Hollywood blockbuster.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
We love talking football with Darren Woodson, Trey Wingo, who are here in our studio. So many different topics out there. What are the Giants going to do for a receiver? They lose 4 guys last week, 3 for the season. Trey, I brought it up earlier.
I know. Just the answer is no.
How about T.O. Reed starts the Hall of Fame clock?
He's 43. Do we not remember him trying to make the Seattle roster a couple of years ago where he couldn't catch a cold?
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. He was going up against some monsters at practice now.
That's true, but I'm talking about games. Look, he had his chance like 3 years ago with the Seahawks, or 4 years ago, and it didn't work out. We really think 4 years later at 43 is going to get better? You know who they should call? It's very simple. Victor Cruz.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that offense better than Victor Cruz. Yeah. He's sitting out there. Maybe the Giants don't want to be stubborn about it, but that's the first call they should be making.
Look, it's hard to just find a guy off the streets. I mean, it really is at this time, and I get it. I mean, the names T.O. or Ocho Cinco is out there. There's so many names that are out there, but you just can't get a guy off the street who's sitting on the couch and say, okay, come on out here and get lined up and run routes.
There's another name people bring up. He just retired, Anquan Boldin, who wanted to go do other things. But if I'm Anquan Boldin, why would I go to the Giants and or the Bears?
If he didn't want to play for the Bills, who are now in first place in their division at the moment, they're tied for first place.
Right. Yeah.
Why would he want to go to the 0-5 Giants?
No, I agree. I agree with that.
Then let me ask for another interesting sort of sidebar with this. If the Giants season continues to go this badly and they wind up with one of the top 2 or 3 picks in the draft, which at this point looks very likely, Trey Wingo, do you think they draft a quarterback?
Well, here's the beauty or the irony of it. As a Jets fan, this must make your head explode. They may get the pick the Jets want. Yeah. Remember? Nobody knows anything in football when it comes to prognostications. Let's just run through this, okay? The Jets have a 3-game winning streak.
Right.
The Giants are winless. The Patriots have lost 2 home games before Week 5. Buffalo and Jacksonville are both sitting in first place in their division. The Saints defense has already pitched a shutout, and the Cowboys have already lost as many games this year as they did last year.
Wow.
I mean, nobody knows anything. You just got to let it all play out. That's the beauty of watching every single season.
On the way over here today? Were you
just there?
Facts in your head. You just wanted to get out. So
10 minutes to Wapner. I'm an excellent driver.
Do the Giants draft a quarterback?
I think they have to think about it. They have to think about it.
Absolutely, they draft a quarterback because we see what's happening with Eli Manning right now, and we've seen we've seen the slide the last 2 to 3 years. I think it's time and age. He's not going to get any younger. You're
not getting rid of Eli, right? You're still having him your quarterback.
He's still your quarterback, but you have to draft a quarterback early. If you have one that you really love in the top 5 picks, you have to get one.
They drafted Davis Webb last year, but I don't know if they think he's their future or not.
Well, Davis Webb, I think, was on that same Texas Tech roster with Baker Mayfield and Patrick Mahomes at one point. So all 3 of those guys were at Texas Tech. Look, Eli is not the biggest problem for the Giants. Let's be clear. I think he's actually playing pretty well, but he is getting That offensive line, now, they lost 4 wide receivers, which is just brutal in one game. But that offensive line has been a problem for most of last year, and it's gotten significantly worse this year. That's their biggest issue.
The Kansas City Chiefs are the last unbeaten team, and right now they deserve for everyone to say they're the best team in the league. But what they're doing, you referred to some of the trickery and all that kind of thing. I've heard a lot of people wonder, when the calendar changes to November and especially December, does all that stuff work? Does this look like a team that's got the secret sauce to go all the way to the Super Bowl?
I think the answer is yes, because they have Kareem Hunt. They can do all these things, but they have a guy who was just wearing people out on the ground. And if you're playing at Arrowhead in December, you're going to have to run the ball. If you're going to have to go to Foxborough, where they've already gone, by the way, and won week 1, you're going to have to run the ball. I think this team can win a lot of different ways. Yeah. And that's the most interesting thing about it.
You know what it's going to come down to? It's going to come down at some point to Alex Smith. And right now, I think he is the MVP of this league, the way he's been playing. But can he hold up in November and December and still play at this level? That's going to be the big question. First of all, can they get home field advantage? And can Alex Smith play the way he's playing? And defensively, with the injuries that they've had, are they at some point going to catch up to this football team? I think right now they're the best team in the league because Andy Reid's the best play caller, and they're running the ball with
They're the most complete.
They're the most complete.
I agree. And the one thing you just can't pick up, in the last game, their center and right guard were out. How long are those injuries going to last? Travis Kelce gets a concussion. Obviously
Eric Berry's out for the year.
So you wonder if that catches up at all. But they are the best team right now, the most complete team.
And this weekend kicks off with a bang on Thursday night. The Eagles and the Panthers, both teams playing really well. So there's always great football to be discussed. Guys, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Trey Wingo, Darren Woodson, lots going on, obviously, and we'll continue to talk about it. We'll shift it back to some of the baseball. A.J. Hinch, the manager of the Astros, made an interesting decision yesterday.
Yes, he did.
Brings Justin Verlander in relief. Winds up working out. Closes out a series with the Red Sox. He'll join us, and so will Louis Riddick in our next hour. Stay with us. Mike and Mike.